Welcome, everybody, to A Place of Possibility podcast. I'm Richard Del Monte.
And I'm Angela Wright.
And we are happy to have you here with us. And today, our topic is going to be, can you actually live on a pot of money when you retire? Like if you have a portfolio or 401k or some kind of, big, all the money you've saved, can you actually live on that, and how do you do it?
Right.
Is it possible?
Yeah. Of course it's possible. We're going to teach you how.
Right.
But I will say, I think it's a really daunting thing. You've worked your whole life. You've saved your 10% into your 401k. And now they're just going to hand you a check on your way out the door. And that money's supposed to last the rest of your life.
Right.
I mean, it's a pretty incredibly...
Right. And how do I know how much I can take and how to invest it all to make it all work, right?
Right. I mean, I think... common sense might say, I shouldn't invest any of this in the stock market. I need to keep that principal secure. And then I just live off of the interest.
Right.
Well, interest right now is
0.01% a year. That doesn't sound too good.
You can't put it in the bank. So what are you supposed to do with this lump sum? And how do you make sure that you don't outlive it?
Right, exactly. Because the last thing I want to do is end up being a greeter in Walmart when I'm 85.
If you need to get outside and be with people at 85, that's a great way to do it. But you don't want to have to do that, right? You don't want to have to work during your retirement.
For sure.
And it's totally possible to create yourself a fixed income stream off of that lump sum of money. Right. There's just a couple of rules you need to follow.
Right. And hopefully not only just fixed, but a rising income stream.
Ideally.
Because we're going to talk about inflation and what the impact is for that, for sure.
Yeah.
So what's the starting point, Angela?
So what do you have to work with? That's the first thing to look at. What are your various income streams for retirement? So most people, you've saved into some kind of retirement account, a 401k or an IRA, something like that. Or maybe your employer did it for you and now you've got a pension, a lump sum pension or something like that.
If you're one of the very fortunate few.
Right. And then some of you out there, maybe some of you more in Richard's genre or age.
You mean my age? Is that what
okay,
you're
I'm
trying
talking
to say?
about you older folks. Yes,
I
am. A lot of you
boomers.
still have pensions. The folks in my generation, unless you're a teacher or you're working at PG&E, you're probably not going to have a fixed income stream of a pension. But some people do, so it's something that we look at.
Yep.
Many of us have Social Security, and a lot of folks have rental income.
Yep.
Now, those I would say are the big ones that most people are looking at.
So you young folks, you're gonna see in another future podcast that we're gonna do. It's really good to be able to build a portfolio of rental assets as well.
Well, it's important.
Income.
We, as financial advisors, talk all the time about diversifying your investment portfolios, but diversifying your types of assets and your income streams is also really important.
Right. Exactly. Yep, absolutely. So
how do we come to this number? Like, how much can I draw? I have this $1 million that I got, I've been saving my whole life. How much can I really draw on that and be sure that I'm not going to run out?
Well, 8%, right? 8% a year.
That's not the answer.
No, it's not true. There are some people that are some supposedly financial advisors, quote unquote, that are on the radio and get a lot of press that are actually advising people that you can take out 8% a year.
Gosh.
Out of a portfolio. And I'm here to tell you that's a good way to go bankrupt fast.
Yeah.
Very fast.
Just think logically about this, right? Your most investment portfolios, once you're retired, you've got a nice balanced portfolio. And so you're looking at 6 to 8%, let's say.
That's what you can make. Yeah, fair. Right.
So if you're earning 8% on your money and you're pulling 8% out, at best, you're staying even.
Right. What about the years when the stock market goes down 20
exactly.
or 30%?
Now you're, pillaging your principal. and also importantly, you're not going to be able to give yourself raises in order to keep up with inflation. And that is super duper important during retirement.
Absolutely. Yeah. Do you remember Cliff Notes?
Who didn't use them?
We're dishing out lots of great takeaways for you and realize it might be helpful to provide you with our version of Cliff Notes, aka DMG's Know Your Possibilities Guide.
To access the tool, download it, and share it, just head on over to the show notes page on our website for this episode and have fun. Take notes, and if you have questions, getting in touch with us is super easy. Just send an email to info@aplaceofpossibility.com or call 925-736-6410.
Well done. So a good number is a withdrawal rate that's below your rate of return. That's important, right?
Yeah.
So the margin should be, in my experience, what do you think? The margin should be somewhere between 2 and 3% below you should be taking out 2 or 3% less than what you're actually making in the long term.
Okay, so by that logic, what we're telling people is if you're earning 6 to 8%, ideally you could take
3 to 5.
3 to 5 out of
3 to 5%. And that's the most. And there's actually been some studies done. The first study was done by a financial advisor, one of these, learned guys that have the green eye shades. And he figured out that if a person had retired the day before the crash of 29,
the start of the Great Depression.
The start of the Great Depression, you could have taken out a 4% level withdrawal and never run out of money over 35 years.
Wow.
So that's a big number. You start out, you just go crash.
I mean, yeah, imagine you retire and then the next day you lose 40% of your money.
Exactly. Ugh. Which could happen.
Yeah.
Could happen.
But even if that does, history shows us that you can still take out that 4% because what we know about investing is that markets do recover.
Right.
Bear markets are often very much shorter than they are, in our minds. In reality, they're super short. And much more infrequent also.
Right. Much more infrequent. Like, for example, a decline of 30% or more since in my career, that's only happened 5 times in 35 years.
Yeah.
So
over very short, couple
very
months.
short. Yeah. So they happen, but they're very infrequent.
Yeah.
So, so we have to take out somewhere between 3 and 5%. The smaller you go, the safer your retirement will be, right? Because you're taking out less. Sure. You're not putting yourself at risk.
Yeah.
The real risk here is let's talk about risk.
Well, okay. So, I mean, I think not everybody can do that, right? You've become accustomed to living on a certain amount of money. And so you do want to max it out.
Sure.
And so what are some of the risks that people face here in doing this? Like, what are the things where we need to be watching out for? So we've decided we can take 3 to 5%. Now what?
Right. So the first thing is you got to be able to, you don't want to be too conservative with your investing and you don't want to be too aggressive. If you put all your money in the stock market, I mean, you end up being in a situation where your portfolio actually could go down by 50%.
Yeah.
It happens, once in a while. And so if you're taking out like 6% out of a portfolio that just went down by 50%, now you're taking out 12% a year. And you're only going to make 7 or 8, so you've already boom. Mm-hmm. Your whole retirement is blown up.
Yeah,
it's been pillaged, as you said. I love that. It's a great analogy.
Yeah, so too aggressive, and that's
pillaged
that's
it and
crazy.
Shot yourself right in the foot.
Yeah,
and that's another consideration about the sequence of returns, right? Mm-hmm. So you don't want to. If you start out and you get hit really bad by a down market in the very early years, it could really destroy your retirement. If you get one later on and later in life, it's a lot easier to recover from. Yeah. But in the beginning, it's really hard because you have many, many years behind you.
Yeah. So get out your crystal ball and make sure you retire at the right time. I mean,
you can't.
Okay, so what do we do?
Well, that's why you have to be diversified.
Diversification. So back to the dang diversification. It's all we ever talk about.
We can't get away from it, folks. It's just part of the deal. But so being too aggressive is a problem. Being too conservative is also a big problem. I don't know which one's worse, actually.
Too conservative.
You think?
Well, says the 40-year-old. Yeah.
If you go into all bonds, what's your return going to be?
Well, right now, 1.5%.
Maybe 2 or 3 if you're lucky. You get into junk bonds, things like that.
I mean, other risks, right? If you look treasuries, we're recording this in the summer of 21, so treasuries are paying 1.5%. Even traditionally, 3 to 4%.
Yeah. The 10-year treasury right now is 1.3%. So if you did that and you want to leave in a factor for inflation, you could pull out maybe 0.5% a year. So on your $1 million retirement portfolio, you're going to get, if you're lucky, $500 a year. Maybe it's $5,000.
It's $5,000.
Okay.
It's not good. Yeah, I mean, you can see why it doesn't work.
Yeah.
However, a good combination of those two things, you limit your equity exposure, but you still have a significant, 20-30% hanging out over there. So you can take advantage of that upside.
Right.
And then you're mitigating the risk with those bonds that are going to continue paying. We are looking at corporate and junk bonds right now that are paying more like 3 or 4%.
Yeah. Junk is maybe up into 5s, in many cases. So what's the sweet spot for how much stock or equities you should have in your portfolio, would you say?
Well, I got to give you the lawyer answer on that one.
It depends.
It depends.
Oh my
Of course,
gosh.
it depends on the person, right?
Yeah.
I mean, so a lot of this comes down. There are, I think, some hard and fast best practices.
Okay.
However, the retiree is the one who has to open that statement every quarter, and I mean, we don't want people keeling over.
Right.
It's supposed to be an enjoyable time in your life, so it does depend, and there is a bit of personal risk tolerance.
Sure. Right.
That's impacted.
But I would say,
however,
that being said, I would say that we have to teach people to be able to take at least some risk with their money.
Yeah.
Otherwise, they're not going to beat inflation and they're not going to survive.
At least 20% of your portfolio exposed to the stock market.
I would go 40 actually, kind of just to be able to get enough growth. And what about the high side? What do you think?
On the high side, I would go up to, like, me when I retire, I'll probably leave my portfolio at 60% equity. I can weather those.
In our client accounts, we don't really let people that are retired go higher than 70%.
Yeah.
It's prudent to go 70 if you can handle the ups and downs of the market. Yeah. But above that, it ends up being a situation where you could kill your retirement.
Those sequence of returns can really get you.
So somewhere between 20 and 70% is probably the right number.
Yeah.
It's
a big range.
Like you said, the lawyer answer, it depends. Right. True. Very true. Another risk is lack of diversification, right? So you just don't have enough different things. Like, what if you put say you worked for Nike and you want to put all your money in Nike stock because it's doing so great, or Starbucks or whatever. What do you tell people?
Yeah, I mean, no, what I tell people. It's like, especially if it's the company that you work for, because then really your whole financial life is tied into this one entity. And I mean, remember Enron? One piece of news came out, one big issue when it hit
Fraud,
the news.
big thing,
I mean, one thing hits the news and you didn't have a chance to sell your stock before it tanked.
Right.
Like, that happened on that day. They were done. And you're done. And that's it. You're toast.
Right.
And I think this happens sometimes with retirees. Like, you've worked for this company your whole life. You feel an affinity towards it. We have a lot of folks that work for a local telecom company. They hold a lot of that telecom stock
because they're comfortable with it.
It paid them their whole life. It gave them everything they had.
Right.
And we get sort of attached to these stocks. And I think that, not diversifying is a huge mistake that retirees make.
Right.
Or, wanting to give themselves a raise and looking at some of the hot stocks. We've had a lot of questions about Tesla. Yeah. My neighbor invested in Tesla, and I could take a Grecian vacation if I had made that kind of money. Get me that. Yeah. And sort of chasing the return. And the reality is, once your neighbor's made the money on it, your opportunities are pretty limited, so you could forget about it if someone's already talking about it. But more importantly, you're exposing yourself unnecessarily. And so our rule is no more than 10% of your total portfolio in any one position. Right.
Any one security. And we hold fast to that. Yeah. And the reason is because and people don't really understand this, but there are 3 levels of risk whenever you invest in stocks. And the first level of risk is the risk of one particular company, like what's happening with that company? How well is it being managed? Or how are their finances? What happens if they go broke? What happens if it's an Eastman Kodak or a PG&E, where one thing happens and puts them basically out of business? Either technological transformation or you're not taking care, you're not maintaining your towers and you're burning the whole state down.
Yeah.
And so
Chevron, right?
Oil is definitely going out for other alternative sources of fuel. So, those are the things that can hit you. Yeah. So that's the individual company risk. And that's uncompensated risk, by the way. You're not getting any more by buying one stock than you would in the market in general. So why take the risk of having so much money in one stock?
And in fact, we were looking at some data recently that showed the largest returning in a short-term period, the stocks that had run up the most. So we're talking about things like Facebook, Tesla,
Netflix, Amazon, Apple.
You got them all, right, I think. Yeah. Right. And then
the FANG stocks.
What happened in like the 10 years after that? So some of these haven't been around for 10 years, but the ones that have.
In history, right.
They do not outperform the rest of the market. So if you miss that initial run up, there is no point in getting into that stock because you're not going to get compensated for that risk.
Right. So you're taking a bunch of risk and you're not getting paid for it.
You're better off going to the S&P.
Right. So there you go. That's the first level of risk, a company risk. Then you have the next level, which is industry risk, which again, if you have, the airline industry or the entertainment or the
So look at what happened with COVID, right? The entire entertainment, travel, and leisure industry tanked all at once.
Utter collapse.
Yeah. Right. And so diversifying yourself across industries.
Right. So if you had technology last year and other areas that did well, you didn't really get hurt. In fact, a lot of people made money. But if you're in that industry, Oh my gosh. If you just had Marriott or something, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
I had a portfolio of Marriott and JetBlue and Southwest Airlines. Nice job. You're going back to work at Walmart.
I mean, 10 years ago, that was a great portfolio.
Of course. Yeah, it sounds great, but it's not safe.
Yeah.
So those are the two levels of risk that are uncompensated. And then there's a third level, just the market risk, being in the stock market, subject to the whims and the daily vicissitudes. I like that word.
I like that word. Where did that come from?
Of the markets and people's emotions. Yeah. Lucky I can remember that at my age, right?
I mean, look, you have a lot of idiotic trading that happens in the stock market.
Yeah. What about GameStop? And all that stuff,
I mean, that is like some next level stuff. But yeah, I mean, that GameStop was this anomaly of you had no news, and here are these Redditors driving up the price of the stock.
Right.
I mean,
for
that's
nothing.
Just, like, how can fundamental analysis is out the door at this point, and how can you plan and hedge for those kinds of risks? You really can't. Right. And then you have general emotional trading, like the day after 9/11, stock markets. Right. That's emotional trading.
Right.
9/11 did not suddenly show us that all of the companies on the S&P 500 were unprofitable.
No,
right?
It didn't.
And that was emotional trading.
Right, exactly. So don't take uncompensated risk is the biggest point. Diversify and have a broad portfolio of stocks. Now, most of the things that we have people have tens of thousands of stocks in our portfolio. So if one stock goes broke, which happens sometimes, they don't even notice it.
Of course not.
That's the way you can protect yourself.
Yeah.
And so you have to be satisfied with unsexy kind of,
Oh yeah.
You can't go to the cocktail party and brag about Tesla or whatever. But you own Tesla. Don't get me wrong. But it's just not one, gigantic holding. Okay. So that's another risk. What about the whole thing of fears people have? We hear a lot of people, the stock market going to zero.
Oh yeah. This is a really common one. And I think I totally understand how people get here in their thinking, because if you turn on the news for 5 seconds, they make it sound like the end is coming every time the Dow drops 200 points, which, by the way, is nothing when the Dow is at 36,000.
Even 900 is nothing, really.
But, I mean, think about like the news. You will get so sick of hearing me say this on this podcast. I think they're going to tune me out eventually, but it's like, the news, if you're reading it in the media, on the television, in a magazine, their purpose is to entertain you and sell ad space. In fact, I would say the main purpose is to sell ad space.
Right.
Secondary is entertaining you so they can keep your eyeballs glued so they can sell ad space.
Clicks and eyeballs, that's what it is, right?
Clicks and eyeballs, yeah. So, I mean, I just want you to remember to take everything that you hear with a grain of salt and really dial back the emotion that's coming across your screen, because it's probably unnecessary.
Right. And they wouldn't have very many people watching or reading if they just said, don't worry, everything's going to be fine.
Nothing really going on in the markets today. Go out for a walk.
It's down 900. Don't worry about it. It'll be fine. Nobody's going to watch anymore.
That's the reality most days. Right. It is an extremely boring situation. Right. And so, I see how people get there. But, the reality is we've been talking about diversifying your portfolio. So for most of you, you only have, let's say, between 20 and 70% of your money in the stock market. And what would have to happen for this, like the entire stock market to go to zero, would mean that every company on the exchanges would have to go completely broke in the entire world, because you're globally diversified.
Bankrupt.
So if that happens, I think that we have much bigger fish to fry in terms of problems in our world. Like, there's no groceries in the grocery store or gas at the gas station if that's happening.
How's your garden at home? Because that's what you're going to need to
Something
eat
big, something big is going on in the world, and you're not going to care about your stock portfolio anymore.
Right. It's never happened. And even in the Great Depression, it didn't happen. Companies survived the Great Depression. Most of them did. And we just continued on. So the odds of that happening, they're just infinitesimally small.
They really are.
We can't say legally that it's impossible. But it's as close to impossible as I could. She's our COO. Can I say that?
I'm like, don't say it.
Chief Compliance Officer. All right, it's possible, okay? I'll
it's not probable.
It's just not likely at all.
It's not. And then remember, even if that does happen, you've limited the amount of money that you've exposed to this. And the bonds, are going to keep you steady during that time period.
Okay. So that's not a real concern when it comes to, it is a concern people have. It's just not, it's not a valid concern. Right. It's unfounded. Great. You're good with the words today.
We got the vocab.
We got it.
Read a dictionary before they came to work.
Okay. Unrealistic expectations about growth.
Yeah.
So thinking I'm going to make 12% a year after year, that's not true?
No, that's not true at all.
That's not true.
And, you know, historically, in a balanced portfolio, 8 to 10% per year. Although I will admit that, you know, in the early 2000s, we were running illustrations at 12%. That was the historical data that we had. We also, you know, took risks. Right. And I just, that's not realistic anymore.
Yeah. So, you know, and certainly it's not even. There's going to be, if you might average 7 to 8%, but it's going to be plus 25 and minus 5 and like that.
I mean, what I tell people, you know, when they first come to work with us is, one thing I can guarantee you is that at some point during our relationship, you will see a loss on your statement, and it will be big and scary.
And you'll probably blame us.
Of course you will, right? We're geniuses when the markets are going up. We're idiots when they're going down. It's funny how that tide turns.
Exactly.
But, you know, the reality is you will have to weather a storm at some point during your retirement, and that's what happens when you take risks.
It's par for the course if you're going to have equities. You know, equities themselves average, you know, 10 to 12% a year. You can't expect to get that kind of return if you're not willing to take some up and downs, because there's no such thing as a 10 or 12% money market fund anymore. Right. Used to be in the 70s and 80s, but not now.
When your mortgage was at that rate too.
Right, it was
not
outrageous.
Exactly a good thing.
Right.
You know,
okay, so and then the withdrawal rates we've already talked about. You can't expect anything more than 4 to 5% max. Mm-hmm. Okay, how about the big one that we see a lot is controlling withdrawals.
Yeah.
People. The risk of, like, you know, oh, my kids, or I got to put a roof on my house, or the biggest one that we've had to deal with recently.
Oh, yeah. Everybody's buying an RV this year. Got to get an RV, which we love you, our RV people.
No, we do. We totally do. Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, with COVID especially, we saw a huge uptick in people wanting to travel around in RVs. And that's not often something that we were planning for initially. You know, when you think about your retirement budget, it's off. Like, I think everybody goes to 90 years old when they're thinking about their retirement budget, and they envision themselves like, you know, sitting, in front of the newspaper for half the day and then gardening the second half of the day. That's not the reality of what you're going to be doing. So setting your budget up properly from the get-go and really thinking through where you're going to be is smart. But then, unexpected things and kids and grandkids. Those suckers will bleed you dry. And I say that with so much love. I have my own kids.
We all know it if you have kids.
Oh, boy, but they do. They get you.
They can bleed you dry for sure. Yeah. So that you hit on a really good point there about what was the first thing?
It was so good you can't remember it.
I can't remember it. No, it was a good one. Something about treating your lump sum like a piggy bank, basically.
Right in that cookie jar.
So, you know, we had a good year. Like this year so far is starting out to be a really good year, right? And the last year or so has been amazing. So people will say, oh, I made so much money. Let me withdraw, you know, $150,000 to buy an RV, for example. You know, well then, so to be able to get $150,000 out to buy an RV, you got to probably pull out $200 and pay the tax if it's a retirement account to net $150. That's for most people, that's a huge hit to their portfolio.
Yeah.
You know, and so if it's planned, you can totally do it. You know, I mean, we get a lot of joy out of helping people actually do that.
For those of you that we allowed to do this, we tested your portfolio. You're fine.
You're fine. Yeah, you're good.
We're not talking about you.
But the problem is, they come back, they found out after they bought the first one, I didn't buy a big enough RV.
Yeah, they do say your first RV is not your last RV. So I guess if that's part of your plans, just plan on buying two.
Just buy a bigger RV than you thought you would ever need. Make sure you get the one with the fireplace in it, because if you don't get it and you go to these RV parks, the guy next door is going to show you his, and you're going to have RV
chandeliers
envy.
And hot tubs now.
All that stuff. Chandeliers.
It's so crazy what you put in these RVs.
You should get one, you know, just go to the big bus one.
Okay. But here's where it happens. Like, I think this is these unexpected and scary things. Like, I'll tell a story about a client who called me.
Okay.
Is now a good time to tell that story?
Yeah. Perfect.
Yeah. So, already was kind of at that 5% draw rate on her portfolio. And unfortunately, her son was arrested. And she called me and said, I need $25,000 to bail my son out of jail. And I thought, oh my gosh, how heartbreaking. Okay, let's see what we can do. I looked at the portfolio, and she was not going to be able to sustain her draw rate if she did this. She had a high likelihood of running out of money too soon. And she didn't tell me what her son was in jail for, but I know that that's public record. So I looked at it. I was able to find him.
You did?
Yeah. Google is amazing.
Yeah.
So I was able to find him, and I found that he was charged with something that the police don't often make mistakes about. I won't really spill the whole
But it was serious.
The whole cup of tea, but it was serious. And I just know, they don't make mistakes. And so I went back to her and I said, okay, here are our options. If you do this, you risk running out of money. What I know about these types of charges are that they're not often in error. And I also know that there's a public defender option that you can take here, because there is no public defender option for retirement. There's no loan that you can go get when you run out of money. However, but the son had options where she didn't. And we guided her into allowing him to, take care of his own issues in his life and get the public defender. And he ended up going to jail and serving a few years, which would have happened anyway had she hired a private attorney. And so I think the outcome was the same, but she was so grateful because in that moment, she was extremely emotional. Like any parent, right? I would bail my son out of jail a million times, right? I love that kid so much. Yep. And so, she was at this really emotional moment, and it took somebody saying, hold on, rationally, here's how this is going to impact everything, to stop and make a different choice. And she
Brilliant.
Secured her money. But this is the kind of thing that happens to people in their retirement. You would never expect this out of your children, right? And it happens.
And sometimes there's things like the expected things like weddings that they want to go in and do it. Or we often hear about new roofs that have to happen. Mm-hmm. It's okay if that's part of the plan when you go in, or to buy a car. They want to take out $30,000 or $40,000 to buy a car. That's fine, but your withdrawal rate that you're starting to take needs to include that I'm going to be taking out extra chunks every so often to go on vacation, big vacations or whatever. That has to be factored in. If you add that in afterwards as a one-off, and you think it's only going to happen once, but it's kind of, we see people that do it periodically, routinely, it becomes something that can really draw portfolio down.
I mean, okay, so let's dig into, how much do I need to live on a little bit more? We're nicely segueing into this. And that's this. So you've looked at what I have. You've decided what you can draw on what you have. Right. Then how do you reconcile that with what you need? And how do you determine that? Because
you need a budget, right?
Yeah. Do a budget.
Sure. So what do you recommend? Because I know you talked about
I have some ideas. Yeah, so if you like to do it online, I love mint.com. There are a lot of ads in that, so watch out for those. Don't listen to the ads and the recommendations, please. Just, add your accounts and categorize your transactions to give yourself an idea of a budget. If you like a paid app that you can share with your partner, there's YNAB, You Need a Budget. YNAB. That's a great one. And then there are also good old fashioned writing it down, just list it all out. I mean, I have all of these great worksheets. I used Excel for years to make a budget. Even if you write it down and add it up, that gets you somewhere.
Right.
And I think, thinking through your days as a retiree, they're going to look vastly different from your days as a working person. And like I was saying earlier, you're not going to sit in your house and garden all day, most likely.
Or watch TV, right?
You're going to get out there. You're going to, want to travel, do things with your grandkids or, go on a motor, get a hobby. Like my mom took up photography in retirement. That's an expensive hobby.
Each lens is hundreds of dollars, right? Exactly.
$1,000. Yeah. So, one great book that I love for doing this exercise, I'll put in the show notes who it's by. It's called What Will I Do All Day? And it's like a workbook style where you can think through a week-long calendar and fill your time and really look at what you're going to be doing. Like you might even spend more in gas than you did with commuting, or more on coffee when you're home brewing yourself special lattes all day. Like you just don't know. So taking the time to think that through in a smart way, and then planning for some of those unexpected. How often did you buy a car when you were working? How often did you you have to replace the roof on your house every 30 or so years. Right. That will probably happen during retirement. Right. So
we commonly have people that haven't thought about that at all, especially if you hate your job and you just want to get out of there, or maybe you have an offer from your company and they're saying, if you don't get out by the end of the year, you're going to lose your medical insurance, right? Which is a big motivator. Of course, you don't want to lose your medical insurance. That said, when you turn 65, you're going to get basically very cheap, medical insurance from Medicare. You could have Cadillac insurance on Medicare for about $300 a month, honestly. So it's only a problem between now and retirement. So you have to be really careful to balance your desire to get out of this hated job with what are you going to do and can you afford it? Yeah. And people will routinely underestimate. They'll come in, honestly, they come in and say, okay, so we can live on $3,000 a month. Okay, well, how much have you been living on recently? Oh, we've been living on about $7,000 a month. And how much are you saving every year? Well, not much. Okay, so you're actually going to go from a net of 7,000 to 3,000. How are you going to do that when you're not doing it now? And you're going to have more time on your hands. So you're going to be spending more money. You're not working 10 or 12 hours a day and commuting to work and all that, which I know that's an anachronism now because of people don't really drive to work much. But
well, think about that though. Look at what people did when they were trapped in their houses for a year. They spent money on their houses, and that's akin to retiring. You're suddenly in your home all day, and it's like, oh, I hate that paint color. Oh, I hate that carpet. Oh, I've always hated my porch. You know, and off you go. Right.
And start thinking about how much look seriously about how much it costs to remodel your kitchen and your bathrooms when you want to do it. You know, I mean, it's way more than you thought. And whatever you see on HGTV, and they're doing it for those are not real numbers. People are getting special. I don't know. Oh, 7,000 for this bathroom. Yeah, nice try. That's not going to happen, right? So you have to be really realistic about what you're going to have to spend when you retire, and don't cut corners. Actually, be realistic about how much you want to travel, how much you want to go see your kids, how much you're going to spend on eating out and, entertainment, stuff like that.
And the biggest expense that everybody forgets.
What?
What is it?
I don't know. What?
What the biggest what? It's around 20 to 25% of your income usually.
Taxes? Tax. Oh, yeah, for sure. Tax is a big one. Could be more. And they're just probably going to go up over in the years ahead. So, yeah, you think about we can live on $3,000 a month. Well, guess what? You probably have to take out $4,500. Right? Before tax to net that. And we've had people come in. The RV thing is really important because I want 150,000. Well, we may have to take out 200 or more to net you 150. Yeah. So you got to think about all that.
If you're a DIYer and you're doing this without an advisor, you definitely add 20-25% onto your, depending on what state you live in, honestly, onto your retirement budget to pay your taxes.
For sure. Absolutely. So there's a lot, you can actually retire on a lump sum, but there's a lot to think about. Inflation, tax, how much, what's your budget?
Well, inflation, you always talk about this story when your dad retired. And I love it. It's such a good illustration of inflation and why we bother with our whole investing thing in the first place.
Point. Yeah, thank you. My dad worked in a steel mill in Pittsburgh, California for about 30 years. And he had to retire at 50 years old because he got arthritis. And so at 50 years old, his pension was about $600 a month. And it was a union pension. It was a good pension at the time because you could buy.
This is the 80s, right?
Pardon?
This is the
1980, exactly, right. And so you could buy a car for $3,000. So $600 a month wasn't bad, right? It was okay. I mean, his house payment was $100 or $200. That was the 50 people who grew up in the 50s. So, but when he died in 2012, he'd been retired for however many years that was, 42 years, whatever it is, and his pension was still $600, but his car, the most recent car that he bought, was more than $20,000. So that's a good example of inflation. You cannot just assume that it's going to be a flat need because what's going to go up? PG&E, medical,
everything.
Gas
was less than $1 a gallon 25 years ago when I started driving, and now look at it, pushing $5 a gallon.
Right,
other factors on gas, I guess, but everything, all prices go up over time. And so if you're looking at your budget and saying, okay, the day I retire, I need $120,000 to live on. We have to use inflation to give yourself raises over time, because that $120,000 is not going to get you very far when you're 85 years old.
Right. And you got to think that, in 25 years, that 125 may be 250 a year. And where's it going to come from? You're still going to be around and you're going to need higher and higher draws. Yeah. Where's it going to come from? Yeah. So got to plan on that.
Yep.
Okay, so let's do a couple of, we have to,
don't forget about, so at the very end of your life, there's one more caveat you have to think about here, and that's, your end of life care. And 15 years ago, everybody was buying long-term care insurance to deal with this. And it turns out those policies are, by and large, terrible. I think we have one client whose their policy paid out fabulously for her mom. Right. I was like, what? Are you sure? Yeah. But otherwise, they haven't been great, and they're getting more expensive and more restrictive. So if you don't already own one, there might not be a good option for you. And end of life care, is averaging about 10 grand a month right now.
Today's dollars.
So that could really get at your principal on those last few months and years of your life, depending on how things go.
If you're a spouse and you're healthy, that it could drain your portfolio because you got to take care of your spouse who's ill.
Yeah.
And it might go on. I've seen some cases where people were in nursing homes or, places like that for 8 years.
Yeah.
That's a lot of money. It could wipe you out.
Yeah.
So that's something to consider also. Good point. Okay, so let's do a couple of case studies. We want to give you some real life stories of people that we've dealt with that actually, a good story and a bad story. I guess we'll start with the bad story first.
Yeah, get it out of the way.
Yeah.
I hate talking about this.
This guy that I worked with for many years had retired, and he and his wife had a couple of kids. Go to the kid story, and the kids were they weren't really self-sufficient. Let's put it that way. So they were living in our clients' houses. And
right, so they had residential rentals.
They had rentals, right? But they had let their kids live in them, and the kids weren't paying rent. So they were losing all that rental income. Mm-hmm. Then the kids wouldn't buy health insurance. This was before the ACA. So the parents were paying for their Blue Cross premiums, and they were exorbitant. Mm-hmm. And so the parents just felt like, we can't not do this. Our kids will, I guess, die, or
they'll be destitute if we don't help them. They'll be destitute.
They'll be homeless. So we have no choice but to do this. And so we kept counseling them that you're draining your portfolio, your retirement portfolio. You're going to end up with destitute yourself potentially. And they ended up they couldn't disconnect from taking care of their kids, which goes to your point.
Yeah, I mean kids in this case, the kids really bled these clients dry. It's so sad.
They bled them dry. So it took them 23 years from a perfectly solid retirement to when they ran out of money in their portfolio.
23 years.
23 years. I mean, that's when they ran out.
People are living well into their 90s now, retiring at 60. Right. Imagine running out of money at 82.
It was a portfolio that could have lasted forever. Yeah. It's just, but they felt like they had no choice. It wasn't like they were foolish or anything. To decide what am I going to do.
I mean, really look, I'm in Target with my kid, and I have a hard time not buying him the toy he needs,
right?
Because he's whining at me, right? And he's so sad. It's a toy. Right. Now imagine your child can't pay rent.
Yeah, your kid's 30 years old.
You're going to jump into action there. Yeah. But the reality is, I mean, think about it this way. If you're having a hard time with this concept, you will end up being a burden on your children if you run out of money. Yep. Who else is going to take you? Can't work, right? A lot of times you're 90 years old, you can't work, or you're tired.
Yeah, you're not in good health.
I mean, it's like if you help them today, you could end up becoming a burden on them later. And then are you really helping them? And so instead, maintain your money, mentor them, help them with their resume, introduce them to your friends who are CEOs of their companies still. Right. I mean, do what you have to do to help them, but allowing them to take your draw rate too high during retirement is not a good idea.
Right. And that goes also for college. You should not be draining your retirement accounts to pay for your kids' college. There are innumerable ways to cover college that your kids could do without a dime coming from you. For example, they could go to JC, right?
Yes.
Community college. It's basically free. That's 2 years. And then go to state college. Yeah. And the state college may be, let's say at the worst it's $25,000 a year maybe to go to Berkeley or something. Mm-hmm. So maybe they could come out of it with $50,000 in debt. That's not an extraordinary burden for someone to get a good job afterwards, and they're paying a few $100s a month. Yeah. It's not, they can afford to take that risk. You can't if you're going to decimate your retirement. Yeah. So, you got to be really careful about that. Weddings is another one, right?
Oh, yeah,
for weddings.
Yeah.
My daughter's got to have a big expensive wedding. Yeah. Okay. But, if you can't afford it, everybody will forget that you didn't provide the best wedding in the world. You're not going to forget that you're on track to be destitute.
Yeah. So I just want to call attention to the fact that we're speaking like really in opposition to some cultural ideas
for
certain cultures. Right. And I see you. I know that, that if you pay for your children to go to college, that they will take care of you later. And that's the agreement you have in your culture. And I think in some cultures that does work.
That's a really good point.
Here in the United States and with children that were raised here don't always abide by that later. Right, so I just think, protecting yourself is number one, because it's like when you're in an airplane. Put your mask on first and then do your baby's mask.
Good point. That's a great analogy.
Put your mask on. Keep your draw rate low. Do everything else you can to help your children. And I think this is like soapboxy, and I'm sorry to say it, but I think teaching your children to fish, help them with their resume, introduce them to people versus paying their rent, you're setting them up for more success in life later on. I mean, I hate to say it out, but true. You have to.
I agree. Okay, so then the good example is a client.
The good and the bad.
Someone actually listened to us and did what we said to do.
All you do is listen to us and we'll be fine.
Listen to us, it's fine, right? That's what we tell our kids too. So this person retired from a major company locally, and like in 1993 or something like that, and he took the money and put it into an IRA.
Also has 2 children.
Has 2 children, but they were self-sufficient. He didn't really have to raid the cookie jar for that. And he kept his withdrawals to what we told him to do. I think we kept him to like 5%. And he's been able to get raises and stuff over the years. And I think he's pulled out like $1.5 million out of his portfolio, more than what he started with. And today he has more than what he started with left.
Can you imagine? Can you say that again? Like put some numbers to that for people who are having a hard time wrapping their brain around it.
Well,
this concept is kind of crazy.
So he started out with, let's say, $1.5 million, and he pulled out $1.5 million over the next 20 whatever years has been since the mid 90s, and he's got today more than what he started with. That's just a function of really, like we talked about, if you're making 7 or 8% and you're only pulling out 5, there's no way your portfolio can't grow by that extra 2 or 3%. Yeah. So it's very simple, but you have to. It requires self-control. Because we're not spending and buying, expensive things and taking care of
and sticking with your investment plan as well. They never made any changes. Like when 0809 happened, it was a really scary time. All assets declined, and it was hard to find a return. They stayed the course. COVID hit. They bought more stock in March of 2020. Well, we did it on our advice, but they let us. Where other clients were calling saying, "I can't take it. Get me out of the market." Yeah. I mean, those people took a hit last year.
Yeah. Just imagine
that will impact the rest of their lives.
Yep, that's true. That's true. So not shooting yourself in the foot is a big important thing to do, right? Not to react emotionally to the short-term gyrations of the market. Yeah. Hugely important. Yeah. So there's some big takeaways. The big takeaways are having a good budget, having a reasonable rate of return expectation, to recap, and also withdrawing the right amount that's within the limits. And not varying, not letting the emotions get involved, and not letting your kids or not letting your emotions change what you withdraw. Yeah. What did I miss? Yeah.
Diversifying the assets,
right?
Maintaining the right investment mix for what you need to accomplish. Yep. I don't know. I have a check.
So it's that simple, folks. That's it. That's the whole story in a nutshell. We can imagine you may have questions about some of these issues that we were bringing up and want to get more clarification. We encourage you to call us. There's some information at the bottom of your screen here with how to get in touch with us, either by phone or email. We hope that you do. We look forward to helping you with your individual questions. And if you don't know us and we haven't met before, we'd look forward to your questions as well. We'd love to help you.
Yeah, and please, if you want us to dive deeper on something, or you have a topic, please send us a message. This is for you, and we want to talk about the things that you want to hear about.
Yep, absolutely. So
what do you have going on the rest of the day today?
What do you mean? Today?
Chit chat for a moment. I don't know. Everyone else does this. We're going to cut that part out.
It's going to be a busy day, actually. We've got a lot going on. I've got a lot of clients to return calls to and stuff. What about you?
Yeah. We have client calls and we've got internal performance reviews. We're halfway through the year here. So.
Are they all are they sweating and...
Probably.
Hopefully. You never know.
I mean, our staff has been working really hard, actually, this year.
For sure.
It's been a rough time. The year and a half and working from home and stuff. It's been hard.
Yeah. We all are kind of...
They're doing a great job.
Yeah. So. Okay, well, with that, we thank you very much for watching our podcast. We hope it was beneficial to you. We enjoyed the time, and we hope you did too. So until the next time, take care and happy investing.
I love it. Happy investing. Bye, everyone.